Picture this: a moth pressing its wings against glass, while behind it, the window stands wide open. In a small apartment overlooking the city, Marcus sends his 14th text of the evening, each message more elaborate than the last, each apology more ornate, each promise grander. His phone screen illuminates his face in the darkness, the only light he allows himself since she left. The messages cascade like a waterfall of words. I'll change. You're everything. Please just give me one more chance. I can't breathe without you. But here's where the ordinary dissolves into the symbolic. As Marcus types, his reflection in the black phone screen begins to shift. His face elongates, stretches, becomes translucent. Wings sprout from his shoulders, not majestic wings, but the dusty, fragile wings of a moth. The apartment transforms around him into a vast glass jar, its walls invisible yet impenetrable. Outside the jar she floats, not as a woman anymore, but as a flame, dancing freely, casting shadows that mock his captivity. The moth Marcus beats against the glass walls, leaving powder from his wings with each impact. The flame outside grows dimmer with each collision, not from lack of fuel, but from disgust. Other flames drift past, drawn to lights that burn steady and strong on their own. But Marcus only sees his flame, only wants his flame. He doesn't notice that the jar has no lid. It never did. The prison was always his own making, built from neediness, brick by brick, mortared with desperation. As dawn approaches, the moth lies exhausted at the bottom of the jar, wings torn from his own frantic beating. The flame has long since drifted away, drawn to a lighthouse that stands alone on a distant shore, needing no one to justify its brightness. In his final moments of consciousness, Marcus sees the truth written in the dust of his broken wings. The hunger that consumes itself becomes the void that repels all light. Psychology calls it anxious attachment, a pattern born in childhood's earliest betrayals, when love felt conditional and safety hung by a thread. The anxiously attached create the very abandonment they fear, their desperate grasping, pushing away what they most desire. They mistake intensity for intimacy, possession for passion. In relationships, they become emotional vampires, draining their partners with constant need for reassurance. They text obsessively, interpret silence as rejection, and paradoxically, destroy love by clutching it too tightly. You see it everywhere. In the friend who can't stop checking if you're okay after every interaction, in the partner who needs constant validation, in the colleague who sends follow-up emails to follow-up emails, each one more frantic than the last. Schopenhauer understood this dynamic as the will turning against itself, desire becoming so intense it destroys its own object. He wrote that we swing between want and boredom, but the anxiously attached have found a third hell, want so desperate it ensures eternal want. The will, in its blind striving, creates the very emptiness it seeks to fill. What the heart mistakes for dedication, the psyche recognizes as desperation. Here's the question that cuts deepest. When did you last beg for someone's attention, and what were you really begging for? Their love, or permission to love yourself? What would happen if you stopped sending that next message? Stopped refreshing that screen, stopped performing your need. The most magnetic among us learned long ago, desire flows toward those who are already full. She found him genuflecting in the rain, a king on his knees before an empty throne. Sarah met David at a conference. He commanded the room, his presence electric, his confidence infectious. Women turned when he spoke. Men sought his approval. But 3 months into their relationship, something shifted. The calls began. Where are you? Who are you with? Why didn't you answer immediately? His voice, once resonant with authority, cracked with need. He began showing up unannounced, bringing gifts she didn't ask for, apologizing for sins he hadn't committed. The metamorphosis accelerates. David's tailored suits begin to fray at invisible seams. His shadow, once sharp and defined, starts to blur and spread like spilled ink. In the mirror of Sarah's eyes, he watches himself shrinking, not all at once, but piece by piece. First his height, then his voice, then his very substance. The office where he once ruled transforms into a throne room, but the throne isn't his anymore. It's hers, and she never asked for it. Each time David says, "I'm nothing without you," a piece of his crown materializes in Sarah's hands. She doesn't want it. The metal burns her fingers. The weight hurts her neck. But he insists, prostrating himself lower with each offering. "Take it," he begs. "Take all of it." His kingdom, built over decades, liquidated in weeks. His friends become her friends. He cancels plans with them to wait by his phone. His hobbies become shadows. The guitar gathers dust. The hiking boots remain unlaced. His own mother calls. Sarah now, because David has made her the center of his universe, the sun around which he orbits in increasingly desperate ellipses. The throne room fills with discarded crowns, not just his, but the ghostly crowns of every man who came before, who made the same mistake. They believed that love meant abdication, that devotion meant self-erasure. The walls are lined with portraits of kings who became beggars, their faces fading with each genuflection. Sarah stands among these ruins, nauseated by the smell of rotting dignity. She came seeking a partner, not a subject. She wanted an equal, not an acolyte. In the final scene, David kneels in an empty palace. Sarah has long since fled, unable to bear the weight of his surrendered sovereignty. He offers his crown to the air itself, to the memory of her presence, to the echo of footsteps that will never return. Rain falls through the ceiling, or are those tears, as he finally understands Schopenhauer's cruel wisdom. A man can do what he wants, but he cannot will what he wants. He wanted to be loved, but his will could only produce abasement. This is reaction formation, the ego's desperate attempt to manage threatening feelings by expressing their opposite. The man who fears his own power becomes pathologically powerless. The one who fears abandonment abandons himself first. Freud traced this to the superego's tyranny, but modern psychology sees it clearer. It's the nice guy syndrome, the codependent's curse. These men appear in therapy offices, confused why their niceness repels. They post in online forums, creating entire ideologies around their rejection. They mistake submission for love, self-erasure for devotion. Schopenhauer saw this as the will's ultimate joke. In trying to possess another through submission, we ensure our own negation. The will to love becomes the will to disappear. We think we're being selfless, but we're being selfish in the most twisted way, demanding that another person become our reason for existing. Power isn't taken, it's given away, one genuflection at a time. Ask yourself this: what crown are you polishing right now, preparing to hand over to someone who never asked for it? What would happen if you wore it yourself instead? In love's economy, the beggar king always dies alone, murdered by his own surrender. Watch carefully. The moment a wolf decides to become a sheep, its teeth don't disappear. They turn inward. James had been a closer in sales, in life, in love. His confidence wasn't performed. It was earned through conquest after conquest. Women described him with words like dangerous and intoxicating. Then he met Alexandra. She was different, he told himself. She deserved better than his usual games. So he decided to become what he thought she wanted, harmless. The transformation began subtly. His leather jacket stayed in the closet, too aggressive. His direct gaze softened to something apologetic, too intense, might scare her. His texts, once Spartan and decisive, became verbose, emotional essays. He started asking permission for things he used to simply do. Is it okay if I? Would you mind if? I hope it's not too much too. Each question mark carved away another piece of his spine. In the metaphorical forest where they meet, James's form begins to shift. His predator's gait becomes a prey animal's shuffle. His eyes, once forward-facing like a hunter's, migrate to the sides of his head, perpetually watching for danger, for signs of her displeasure. The forest itself recoils. Nature abhors such violations of essence. The trees lean away from him, recognizing neither wolf nor sheep, but some grotesque hybrid that belongs nowhere. Alexandra watches this transformation with growing revulsion she can't quite name. Here was a wolf in sheep's clothing, but not in the traditional sense. He had skinned himself alive to wear the costume. His attempts at vulnerability weren't honest. They were calculated performances of weakness. Every "I miss you so much" was a bear trap disguised as a flower. Every "you mean everything to me" was a cage masquerading as a gift. The other wolves in the forest gather to witness this abomination. They don't attack. There's no honor in destroying what has already destroyed itself. The sheep flee too, sensing the poorly hidden fangs, the predator's hunger dressed in prey's clothing. James stands alone in a clearing, neither hunter nor hunted, but something worse, a creature in betrayal of its own nature. In the climax, Alexandra finally speaks the truth. I was attracted to the wolf. This thing you've become, it disgusts me. She doesn't run, she simply walks away, leaving James to contemplate his reflection in a pool of water. But the reflection shows neither wolf nor sheep, just an empty outline, a void where authentic self should be. A discarded mask from an earlier story floats past in the water, and James reaches for it desperately, but it dissolves at his touch. This is the shadow self in reverse. Instead of hiding our dark aspects, we hide our light, our power, our edge. Jung called it the golden shadow, the positive qualities we refuse to own. Modern psychology sees it in the nice guy who suppresses his sexuality, the strong woman who plays weak, the genius who plays dumb. They think they're being moral, but they're being manipulative, using weakness as a weapon, submission as a strategy. Schopenhauer knew this game. The will masquerades as its opposite to achieve its ends, but the masquerade becomes the prison. When we pretend to be weak to gain love, we ensure we'll be loved only for our performance, never for our truth. The will, in trying to be clever, outsmarts itself into non-existence. She fell for the wolf, but you gave her a sheep with filed down teeth. Here's what haunts the midnight hours. What essential part of yourself have you buried to seem safe to someone? What would happen if you let it breathe again, even if it meant losing those who prefer your performance? The deepest truth, attraction, dies not from too much danger, but from too much safety, especially the false kind. Listen closely. That's not the sound of coins falling. It's the sound of a man turning himself into currency. Michael kept a spreadsheet not for finances, but for love. Every dinner paid, logged, every gift given, tracked, every favor done, recorded. He called it investment in the relationship, but Marina felt the weight of an invisible debt growing with each gesture. His love came with terms and conditions, compound interest, and an expectation of returns that no amount of affection could satisfy. The spreadsheet was just the beginning. Michael's reality began to warp into a vast marketplace where everything had a price tag. His time, $200 per hour, the opportunity cost of his consulting rate. His attention, valued at the price of the deals he could be closing. His presence at her sister's wedding, calculated against the networking event he missed. Love became a transaction, and Marina transformed, not by her choice, into a balance sheet. In this twisted bazaar, Michael himself begins to change. His skin develops a subtle sheen, like fresh printed money. His words ring with the hollow sound of coins. When he says, "I love you," Marina hears the ka-ching of a cash register. His embrace feels like being wrapped in a contract. His kisses taste of copper and calculation. The marketplace grows more grotesque. Other merchantmen appear, all hawking their emotional wares. "I'll give you commitment for exclusive access, security for submission, devotion for admiration." They bid against each other, driving up prices, creating inflation in the economy of affection. Marina walks through this bazaar, horrified, as men hold up signs listing their emotional assets, their relationship portfolios, their love ROI projections. But here's the divine joke. The more Michael invests, the more bankrupt he becomes. Each transaction depletes not his wallet, but his soul. He doesn't notice that with every "you owe me," spoken or unspoken, a piece of his humanity vanishes. His reflection in shop windows shows not a man, but a walking receipt, itemized and totaled, waiting to be cashed in. The climax arrives when Michael presents Marina with an actual invoice, emotional labor rendered, payment due in reciprocal feelings. The itemization is extensive, listening to work complaints, providing comfort during period, hazard pay included, meeting parents, overtime rates applied. Marina doesn't argue. She simply hands him a coin, a single worthless penny, and says, "This is all your love is worth, because love that demands payment is not love at all." The marketplace collapses. The other merchantmen scramble to collect their emotional investments, but find their hands full of ash. Michael stands in the ruins, finally understanding that he has spent years purchasing something that can only be given freely. In the rubble, he finds a moth's broken wing from our first story, a crown from our second, filed down teeth from our third. All the ways men destroy themselves, trying to buy what cannot be bought. This is transactional object relations, the pathological inability to relate without keeping score. Psychologists trace it to early experiences where love was conditional, where affection had to be earned through achievement or compliance. These men become emotional accountants, turning relationships into spreadsheets. They appear generous, but every gift is a hidden invoice. They say, "I love you," but mean, "You owe me." They mistake investment for intimacy, payment for passion. Schopenhauer predicted this commodification of the sacred. The will reduces everything to possession, but some things possessed become nothing at all. When we make love transactional, we ensure we'll never receive love, only payment. And payment for love is the opposite of love. It's prostitution of the soul. The man who pays for love always overpays for loneliness. Tell me, what emotional invoices are you carrying right now, waiting for someone to pay? What would happen if you burned them all, asked for nothing, expected nothing? Here's the cruelest irony. The only wealth in love is the ability to give without counting. There's a moment when you finally see yourself as others see you. It feels like dying, because it is. They sat in couples therapy, but Christopher heard nothing the therapist said. He was too busy watching the surveillance footage of his own life playing on invisible screens around the room. Every desperate text, every pathetic plea, every moment of self-abasement, all projected in high definition. But the worst part wasn't the playback. It was watching Emma watch it, seeing her face transform from love to pity, to revulsion, to nothing. The therapist's office began to shift, walls becoming mirrors, infinite reflections, stretching in all directions. But these weren't ordinary mirrors. They showed truth, not image. In one, Christopher saw himself as the moth from someone else's story, beating against glass that didn't exist. In another, he wore a crown made of his own severed spine. In yet another, he stood in a marketplace, auctioning off pieces of his soul to the lowest bidder. Emma's reflection told a different story. She wasn't the cold, withholding woman Christopher had painted in his mind. She was exhausted, drowning in the ocean of his need. In her mirror, she appeared as someone trying to love a black hole. No matter how much she gave, it only grew hungrier. Her reflection showed the weight she carried, his happiness, his worth, his entire sense of self. She was Atlas, but the world on her shoulders was just one man's crushing dependency. Then the mirrors began to crack, not from impact, but from the weight of truth. Each crack revealed another layer of self-deception. Christopher had told himself he loved too much, but the mirrors showed he didn't love at all. He consumed. He thought he was giving everything, but he was taking everything, especially her air. He believed he was fighting for love, but he was murdering it with his bare hands, strangling it with need. The final mirror was different. It was the only one that wasn't cracked, and it showed not the past, but the possible future. Two versions of Christopher stood side by side. One continued the pattern, older, more desperate, cycling through relationship after relationship, each woman a new mirror to avoid seeing himself. The other stood alone, but whole, having finally learned the ultimate lesson. You cannot love another from an empty cup, and you cannot fill your cup from another's hands. Emma spoke then, her voice cutting through the shattered reflections. I didn't leave because you loved me too much. I left because you loved yourself too little and expected me to make up the difference. She walked through the mirrors like they were mist, leaving Christopher alone with infinite versions of himself, all begging the same question: why wasn't I enough? But the mirror that refused to lie whispered back, you were never supposed to be enough for someone else. You were supposed to be enough for yourself. This is the moment of psychic death and rebirth that Jung called individuation, but the modern psychology knows as the collapse of codependency. It's the therapeutic breakthrough that comes after months of resistance, when the false self finally dies and something real might be born. These men arrive at this moment through different paths: rock bottom, abandonment, or if they're lucky, therapy. They finally see that their love was vampirism, their devotion was desperation, their commitment was codependency. Schopenhauer knew this moment too. He called it the turning away of the will, the moment when desire sees itself and recoils in horror. The will to live sees itself in a mirror and recognizes its own futility. This is why the final fable must end here, in this moment of terrible clarity. because this is where the real story begins or ends. The man who sees himself clearly must choose, evolve or repeat. So here's the final question, the one that determines everything. When you strip away all your performances of need, all your desperate strategies for love, all your Baroque apologies and grand gestures, what's left? Who are you when you're not begging someone to complete you? The answer to that question is the only love story worth telling.